Welcome back to the 7th Grade Mustache. On today's episode, we'll be speaking about Negro esoterica. The jumping off point for this conversation is going to be a paper that Dr. Martin Luther King wrote in college. This paper is about the connections between the ancient mystery religions and Christianity. Many of you probably have never heard of this. I have to be honest with you. When I first heard about this, I was a little bit surprised. But then when you think about somebody as wise and as educated as Dr. Martin Luther King, it really should not come as a surprise when you consider his grasp on the spiritual nature of ancient religions. And so when you dig deep down into this document, it reveals a lot of things from an ancient perspective and how these ancient religions or these belief systems have been folded into Christianity. And in his research, Dr. King, he draws upon many interesting examples. He talks about the cult or the belief system of Mithra or Mithraism. There are different types of rituals and vows one had to take. He talks about a wide variety of ancient religions. But one thing I found a bit disappointing is that he stops in Greece. He doesn't go beyond ancient Greece in this document. So you have to also understand that Dr. King was a black Greek. He belonged to a black fraternity. And some would say that he was also Boule. So there's a bit of indoctrination. Duct Tape, I'm sure you had something to say regarding how Dr. King lamented quite a bit on the perspective from a Roman and Greek civilization, as opposed to going all the way back to Egypt.
I find it rather frustrating because he named several different cults, several that were cults prior to the Christianity that we know of. A lot of those things existed in Greece, Mesopotamia, all the way to Asia. Even some of the books that are quoted were talk about Orientals. Now, we were kind of waxing poetic about what Oriental means because in German, Oriental does mean black. But he's talking about these different cults, and nothing. He completely ignores Africa as the origin of anything. And they also he takes it easy on the Catholic Church, a Roman Catholic Church. He takes it very easy on them. So it was kind of frustrating. It was enlightening, but frustrating too, because at no point in time did he hit the motherland. But he made sure that he was thorough. He speaks of different versions of the Immaculate Birth.
If you look at the very first couple of paragraphs, even the first paragraph, it says, the Greco-Roman world in which the early church developed was one of diverse religions. So right there, he's telling you what the perspective is from a Greco-Roman point of view.
The other thing is that he has two papers. This is the second of two papers. I don't know if this was his actual a dissertation for his doctorate or what, but this was the second of two papers. And some of the stuff that he explores in this, he explores that he's like elaborating on in this paper. So like I said, it's a deep paper.
He says he calls them the mystery religions. And he said they covered an enormous range and manifested as a great diversity in character and outlook, ranging from Orphism to Gnosticism, from the orgies of Kabira to the fervors of Hermetic contemplation. So he's talking about everything. He's talking about these people that were straight hedonist to all the way into like the pious monks that were just, bookworms.
Look, first things first. Like I said, this is a very deep paper. But what he's saying is that when Christianity became what it is, it branched off from these other religions. They had some influence. He's not saying that it's based on those religions. He's saying that there was influence because these people came from those other religions to this religion. And this religion offered light, hope. You didn't have to be a certain bloodline. You didn't have to. It's kind of the same thing that America did for politics. This religion did for the people of the world, where you had the right to happiness, whether it's here or later. You could achieve power. And it talks about some of these other stories that obviously influenced Christianity because the stories are similar to other stories. But what it offered was this freedom that these other religions didn't offer. You were stuck in a caste system. The same way religion is the same way it was over in Europe, where people from England came to America. You were stuck in a caste system. In America, you're allowed to get out. Christianity gave you the ability to get out of the caste system, and you weren't stuck or if you're a peasant on earth, you wouldn't be a peasant in heaven. So that's what's really important.
I highly recommend all the listeners to go and source this document, download it, get a printed copy, and really devour it because it's really interesting. It's about 20 pages, but it's a good read. It's a good read. But see,
the exact name is The Influence of the Mystery Religions on Christianity.
Yes,
by Martin Luther King Jr. And it says
1949
Theological Seminar, 1949. Yep.
Right. So
it says November 49th to February 15th, 1950. So he must have researched it for quite some time and probably argued back and forth.
It was a semester in school. It was a semester in school.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. So let's consider time as a reference point. And so from there, we're going to go backward because that was 1949, 1950. And it's funny because that's actually the time period for a popular occult esoteric show about black people that's on HBO right now called Lovecraft Country. But we're not here to talk about that because actually we're going to go into Harlem, and Harlem in the early 1900s, because at the beginning of Harlem in the 1900s, the black writers of the Harlem Renaissance were inspired by a white man named Alfred Orage. Alfred Orage, he was somewhat of a occultist and esoteric teacher. And these esoteric traditions of Hermeticism and Kabbalah, alchemy, and Rosicrucianism were introduced to the black folks in Harlem, New York City, around the early 1900s, around 1904, 1905. And this guy, Alfred Richard Orage, he was British, but he was the student of a Greek Armenian guy named George Gurdjieff. Now, to those who study the occult, they know that Gurdjieff was very famous about, teaching in Paris and throughout Europe about these things that he learned in the quote unquote Orient or in India or in Eastern Europe. But these things, these New Age things that Gurdjieff was teaching, he had got them from Madame Blavatsky. Now, Madame Blavatsky, or her actual name was Helena Blavatsky. She wrote several books in the late 1800s, around the turn of the 20th century. And these books came to influence these guys that influenced the writers of the Harlem Renaissance. But there was also a lot happening around that time. There were all these people who were spiritualists. And spiritualists are people who would have, seances, and they, go on the road, have these vaudevillian road shows, and they would do palmistry, and they would sell, oils and herbs to people on the roadside. Well,
Harry Houdini shit.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, my brother, because there was one guy, he was a black magician, and his name was Black Herman, born Benjamin Rucker. And he was born in 1889, and he passed in 1934. And he was a student and assistant of Prince Herman, who was a white magician. Now, what's funny is that Prince Herman had a medicine show selling tonics made of alcohol and herbs. And he called it the Secret African Remedy. And he would put on these shows, he would do magic tricks, and he would sell these tonics to people. And Black Herman was his assistant. Now, eventually, Prince Herman passed away in 1909 when Black Herman was 17. Black Herman went solo. And he was a bit of a militant. And he would get locked up, arrested for his different shows that he would put on. But he combined stage magic, occult magic, and superstition. So he was a young man who believed that he was descendants of Zulu tribesmen. He said that his knowledge was passed down through a griot and that he was a descendant of Zulu shaman. And he also said that he could imitate bird sounds that are native to South Africa. On stage, he would make these sounds. In 1925, he published a book called Secrets of Magic, Mystery, and Legendaron. So I bring him up because it's important to understand the background, the backdrop of what's going on here. So Africans have been freed from slavery for about 45 years and maybe 50 years. And so people are traveling across the West into the Midwest, going north, setting up towns, Tulsa, towns in Nebraska. And, they're becoming quite industrious. And so education is flourishing, and these African people want to learn about where they came from. They want to learn about their origins. And along with these things, alongside all this, the griots, the storytellers that came over on the ships, have been passing along these traditions, some of which are shamanic. So this is part of the reason why you have this flourishing of these occult teachings in places like Harlem. There's this curiosity to want to learn about this. So at this point, I'm going to start by saying the knowledge that these black people are accumulating is going to be either going to be native, meaning ancestral, or non-native, meaning coming from a European or Far Eastern Eastern philosophy. And so therefore, what we have is an amalgamation. We have this gumbo of things, because also in a corollary or an auxiliary sidebar, you have the African traditions, the West African traditions of the Orishas. And these are being tucked away and hidden behind Catholicism. And so you have these things that people call hoodoo or voodoo, depending on your intent, is still living on all the way up to this day in disguise behind Catholicism so that they could keep it alive. And so this Black Herman was an influence on a very pivotal black figure in history and entertainment, a man named Sun Ra. Sun Ra, his first name, he was named Herman, and his namesake was Black Herman. So, Black Herman is the reason why Sun Ra is called Herman. Sun Ra, if you know anything about Sun Ra, you know he is way out there regarding this pineal gland driven, funky, intergalactic jazz Afrofuturism. And for the record, he is probably the first Afrofuturist. So, Sun Ra was from Chicago, I believe. He was either from Chicago or Mississippi. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. But he had an abduction experience. So not only is he like the first Afrofuturist, but he's also one of the first abductees on the record. We're not even talking about like just black abductees. We're talking about just like how white people in the 50s went crazy talking about UFOs. They were abducted and they picked up cows and guys came down in Nazi uniforms and took up. No. This guy in the late 20s, early 30s said that he was abducted several times by extraterrestrials. That's another whole thing altogether, but I thought that'd be, pretty cool to mention that. So then you have this atmosphere of all these reefer smoking musicians. They get together, they smoke ganja, and they get deep, and they cipher up, and they talk about, man, listen, I was abducted by a UFO, and da-da-da-da-da, and all this crazy stuff. And then he's probably dating a chick whose mama reads tarot cards, or she reads palms, or her grandma, sacrifices chickens on the full moon because that's something that her great grandma told her to do for good luck and this and that. These old ways that are taught.
Or they fuck with that hoodoo, and when they needed revenge, they invoke the spirit of Oshun. Oshun didn't play.
Yeah,
there was no negotiation with that nigga. And so the crazy part is that we don't understand how many religions that white folks had. But anytime you bring up any black folk religion that's really powerful, they tell you no. Or I even saw where was Farwell, one of the motherfuckers on the Christian shit, the 700 Club, was saying that the reason that The Haitians worship the devil, and that's how they got from under French rule and white man's rule. And bad things happened to Haiti. No, bad things happened to Haiti because white folks are mad about Haiti. Haiti has paid over $15 billion in restitution to France. So trust me, France got paid. But the bottom line is that those people were not worshiping Satan. No, not at all. And they had a specific religion, voodoo or hoodoo, like my brother told you what you want to call it.
But it depends on the intent.
Yeah. But the bottom line is that they had a belief structure that they brought with them, and that's it. The other thing is that you got to understand that when you talk about the Tainos and the people that were native to the area, they had their own belief system. They were black to begin with. You're not dealing with any American Indians or any these Asians or whatever light-skinned people. These were dark-skinned people to begin with. So, like I said, what they brought with them and what they used to get free, and whether it was poison with Mackendall or whatever, but you got to understand that our religion we're just as complicated as everybody else. We're just as vibrant and variety as anybody else. But the issue is this, that our shit worked for us. It's really, like I said, it was really frustrating to read this paper by King, one of our black standouts, and there's nothing in it had any color to it. So that's why it was so frustrating. And then you find out there that we have been, I don't know what the word is. We've been, it's not occultism, but we've been spiritual for a long time in this country, and before we got this country, or the natives to this country, we've always been. And that's why a lot of the stuff my brother's telling you is shamanic. This is shaman belief, and they knew how. Look, if any of y'all Boy Scouts, remember they teach you, like, if you find mistletoe, don't mess with those white berries. Well, talk to some of the Native Americans up in Canada, and those white berries cure cancer. I'm telling you this. Look it up. So. Yeah, we have many religions. We have many things that we were using to influence us. And some of these guys, I get it. They were influenced by white people, but they gave them the courage to come out and show what they knew. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. So, again, time and perspective is really important to understand the basis of many of these things, because if you start with only the Greco-Roman perspective, you completely leave out the fact that the Greeks went to school in Egypt, in the temples of Egypt, what they called the mystery school. These people took that and with their childish-like minds took it back to their country and renamed it and took the credit for individually what they had already learned, which is, common to the people who spent time in the temples in Egypt. So the Kemetic mystery school is what was studied by the Greeks. But if you look at the Kemetic system, it is the true foundation of the Christian religion. But you can't stop there. You have to go even further back in time, because there's a tribe in West Africa called the Dogon tribe. And you hear things about them almost like it's an urban legend. You hear things that the Dogon tribes communicate with extraterrestrials. Their eyes are so strong that at nighttime they can identify more than 100 star systems. The Dogon tribe, when you look into their history, you see Kemetic Egyptian hieroglyphs in their teachings.
What he's telling you is that the Dogon tribes are leftover Egyptians. When the barbarians came and forced them to the west, these are the remnants.
But when you here's the thing, though. Hold on, I got to stop you. They're actually what their knowledge is. It's older. It's older than Kemet. Okay, so go ahead.
Yeah, no, you are correct. Their knowledge is older than Kemet. What he's saying is that the book that we always talk about is it's called A Serious Problem. It's about the star Sirius B. So how is this tribe in northwest Africa, the Dogon tribe? How come they knew about the Seven Sisters, which is what we thought for many years was one star is seven stars? How did they know that? That's because their knowledge exceeds that. And the other thing about them, they are basically Egyptian monks or Kemetic monks, or even before that, is because that they worship the Old Testament. They don't eat pork. They don't do anything on the Sabbath. All the Old Testament stuff that we know to be Jewish, these guys are doing, and they ain't got the Bible no place that we know of. So what my brother's telling you is that Christianity is, as far as we know, maybe before Egypt. The other thing my brother was talking about when it comes to this Greco-Roman thing, they renamed everything. Sometimes you don't realize we're talking about the same thing because they have different names. They call it the Punic War. That was Hannibal. They changed the name of everything. Egypt was Kemet. They call it Egypt. No, they changed names of all this different stuff. So you don't realize sometimes we're talking about the same thing. The Punic War, Punia was Carthage. So, like I said, they're known for changing deities. They're known for changing people's names. They're known for changing whole names of countries. We talk about Mu from time to time. They call it Lemuria. We talk a lot of the things we talk about. Greeks had a different name for it. You don't realize we're talking about the same thing. And that's where a lot of the confusion comes in. Even when it comes to this mystic art and these different sciences, they use different names. So I just want to throw that out there. Proceed, Roscoe.
Okay, so you it's funny, man, like how you say something and it's exactly like the next thing that I was about to say, because we're pretty much in the same wavelength as far as like a lot of this is concerned, man. There's a lot to be said about these unspoken agreements. So now you brought up the fact that you talked about how the Dogon tribe. Well, let's talk about them for a second, because let's talk about the Wolof tribe of Gambia. They were the most powerful, were the most powerful tribe south of the Senegal River, an area that was once the domain of the Mali Empire. But that's not the most important part. One of the most interesting thing about the Wolof people, they are descendants, according to Cheikh Diop, they are descendants of Atlantis. That's right. That's right. That's right. The people from West Africa are descendants of Atlantis. So, but it isn't just, some guy from West Africa who was highly intelligent named Cheikh Diop. This information comes from more than one place, because if you read The Secret Doctrine by Helena Blavatsky, she says there were 5 root races. The first one was the Polarian, and they were pure ethereal. They were energy, and they would give birth by splitting like an amoeba. And so they existed more than 2 million years ago. So I'm going to stop right there.
Don't.
No.
No.
Right. The reason why I'm parking it right there, because we have been taught a narrative. This is the script. You're going to stick to it. Everything that happens with the flood, everything that happens before the flood is just the Garden of Eden. And then, there's some people born, and then there's a flood. And then there's a flood, and then there's, a city. And, the first city that was established was ruled by a king named Atana. And that's our starting point, and that's Mesopotamia. Well, actually, kids, nope. It goes way further back. But here's the thing, though. Hold it. These things are transferred through verbal communication, through griots. So people ask, how is this information from such long ago? How is this transferred? It's transferred by word of mouth in the ancient way, when tablets weren't available, when ceramic stone tablets weren't available to scribe or just carve into. So I'm going to move on, because, we
No, hold it. You got some deep shit. Hold on. First things first, if you want to look up the truth about Atlantis, you must understand when you read about Plato, then Plato talks about his ancient ancestor. So he got the information from his ancestor. His ancestor is 900 years older than him.
Okay.
So
Plato was a student of Solon, and Solon spent time in Egypt, and that is where he learned of Atlantis. And
no, that's true too. But he also there was also a book written by his ancestor. He got it from both places. That's when he realized it was real. You got to remember.
I know. But he wrote 2 books though. He wrote 2 books. All right, and in those books he talks about Atlantis. But I'm getting to that. Just hold your fire, bro. Hold your fire. I got some more ammo. So
I know you do.
So dig this. So now we come to the second root race, which is called the Hyperborean. The Hyperborean.
Hyperboreal.
They occupied a place which is now considered Canada and Scandinavia, that area that would cover that area. And this was before the Earth had a tilt to its axis. And so therefore the sun warmed that place. It wasn't a cold area. So then the people of Hyboria gave rise to the Lemurian people. And the Lemurian people, they existed about 34 million years ago in the Jurassic era. They coexisted with dinosaurs. And these are the people that the Melanesian, or the people of South Pacific,
Yes.
and the Easter Islands, and the people that are now the Aborigines are the descendants of Lemurians. So you wonder why. Why do these people look so different from everybody else? They look black, but they look kind of black in a different way. So it's like, all right, what is it about these people, and what is it about their culture that is so otherworldly?
If you're looking for proof, there's proof out there. Look, you talk about a bunch of different stuff. So first, that's what I was telling you. Lemuria, if you look at African books, Lemuria is called Mu. So when you realize Mu had three races, had a white, black, and an Asian race.
Okay, but hold on. But let's give people perspective. Let's tell them where it is. Lemuria occupied an area that touched Africa. So it was in the area of the Indian Ocean. So over there hold on.
Part of it is don't forget the big part is also whenever you guys see those documentaries about Japan has this underwater city. And
yeah, there you go. There you go.
That is part of Mu, and so Mu was large. Now the other way you have proof. So you have these underwater. Like, they say it's mountains, but they're flat and they look like plateaus. That's part of Mu. Now, the other part of Mu that exists now that people can't quite figure out in Micronesia and Polynesia, like my brother was talking about, they have these artificial islands, and they can't figure out where do these artificial islands come from. They're made from like a bunch of stones blocked on the top of each other, and then they realized what these artificial islands were for. They were to stop the tsunamis. When there's an earthquake on the other side of the Pacific, it would cause a tsunami to go through, like Micronesia, like you said, Polynesia, in that area. Well, these fake islands would stop it from hitting these other islands. They were done by, that is some of the remnants of Mu, well, Lemuria. But you got to understand, going back to Atlantis, it gets even deeper than that. Plato described Atlantis as the sister of Egypt. So first you got to dissect what the word Atlantis means. It means city of what? City of Atlas. So when you do your history and find out what city had a king Atlas, you find out Atlantis is right there in what's that country? I can't think of the name.
Morocco.
Morocco. No, Mauritania. Well, modern day Morocco, Mauritania. So when you see that the eye of Mauritania, which is this concave structure, that is Atlantis. They know where Atlantis is. They've known for years where.
But let's explain something. The reason why this is hard to wrap your mind around geographically is because this happened so long ago. This happened millions of years ago. And the reason why this is so hard to wrap your mind around is because during this time, the tectonic plates have been playing musical chairs. And they have been shifting around and creating new land masses.
Pole shift, yes.
Correct.
So like pole shift and stuff like that.
Okay, so rock with me on this. So let's go back to Lemuria for a second. You have these people who crossed the landmass, which became Australia, and these black Aboriginal people from Lemuria who had a different way of thinking. They have a way of existing they call dream time. They can share a dream. They can talk you into their dream and erode the walls around reality around you so that you're standing in this person's dream that they're manifesting through word sound power. That's right. Because they're on a different wavelength. That's why Aborigines of Australia can do this. So but because they're descendants of a different time and place who had a different technology and type of architecture. So what I want to say now is that we go from Lemuria into Atlantean. The Atlantean people, they were a trip. The Atlantean people were on something else because they started in Africa 4.5 million years ago. They started in Africa in a place that is now occupied by the Ashanti people in West Africa. So these Atlanteans who rule
Hold it,
this.
hold it. Let me hold it. Let me explain something to you. The reason this is so hard to understand is that we keep living in the now. So when we talk, like
There
when
it
you get that
is.
DNA test and they tell you, and they sit there and tell you, hey, your family lives here. That's where they live now. That may not have been who was there back then. And you got to understand there's been two major floods, that worldwide floods that we know about. There's one that's 12,000 years ago and one that's 14,000 years ago. That's why a lot of these coastal areas, like a lot of these genius ass people, Atlantis was right there. When you look at that map of Africa, a satellite map, and you see how that sand washes to the right, like it literally was, the sand was washed from the ocean and took out. So what I'm saying is that where these people exist now is not where they existed back then in iniquity. And so it's really hard for you to understand. It's also difficult for when people tell you stuff like they found that brother in South Carolina that has that Y chromosome that's 312,000 years old.
There you go. Tell it. Tell it.
So you got to understand that, you know, we were already here. We did not come from monkeys. We did not come from Cro-Magnon man and none of that bullshit. You know, those were our bitches. And so when you understand that people existed, that this technology existed. Now here's another crazy one. Do your research. Easter Island. What do they call Easter Island? The navel of the world.
Right.
And there was a civilization that came from the north, and they're telling you they came from Mu or Lemuria, whatever you want to call it. And guess what they do? When a child is born, they keep the umbilical cord and they put it away and they literally store it. Now, why is that? See, all these super smart people. What's that key word we always hear
Stem
about?
cells.
Stem cells, T cells, and all that. Guess what? God gave you an exact copy of your DNA. It's in your umbilical cord. If you keep your umbilical cord and say that you get sick later on or you have some kind of gene defect, they can use those stem cells from your own umbilical cord to fix you. Everything we needed was given to us. Yeah, there's literally a culture based on that where they save the umbilical cords forever. And the thing is, I'm a diabetic. You know that they actually get T cells and stem cells from other family members to fix diabetes in some places. If I had saved my own umbilical cord, I probably could have used my own stem cells to heal myself. This is real stuff. This is ancient technology. This is ancient history. And we forgot it because when these great floods happen, they literally wash away culture. They don't just wash away physical cities. They wash away entire cultures. And then we have to start over. And what happened? These pagan motherfuckers in the middle of the country who were pagans and dinosaurs and flesh-eating barbarians, because the water didn't get to them, now all of a sudden their culture is the one that permeates the earth. So you got to understand. I'm sorry. I'm on a tangent.
No, keep rolling. It's good.
What you got to understand is that these floods washed away the history, and we're forgetting it, and we're learning it gradually. And whenever they find these major things, they don't want to tell you because it completely kills their thesis. You got to remember, these scientists who are writing these books and shit, they get paid to lie. So if they find out something that doesn't jive with what they were saying, like oh shit, I got to write my whole book over. You think that motherfucker's going to write his whole book over, or you think he's going to cover that shit the fuck up? You know, he or she will cover that shit the fuck up. And so you got to understand that these cultures that we're talking about, the Folsom tribes, look, it's been proven by Sheikh Anta Diop and Ivan Van Sertima, the original inhabitants of the Americas, North and South America, were always black and dark. They did this is even when they start messing with the DNA, it gets complicated because I try to explain to you people that female DNA goes back farther than male DNA. That's why it's always been difficult to explain stuff. But we know one thing, like I said, when you talk about that man in South Carolina, actually he was dead. It was his son or his daughter that went to one of these DNA places, and they're like, who's your father? They're like, well, my father just died. Who is your father? So they dig this dude up, do a DNA test on him, and find out his Y chromosome is one of the oldest chromosomes on the earth, and it goes back to the Igbo tribe of West Africa.
We talking
there
about
are
that.
11 there are 11 members in that tribe that have the exact same Y chromosome, and this chromosome is older than fuck. And they're like, oh, what's going on here? It kills the fact when they try to tell you that we're Neanderthals, because no, I ain't got no Neanderthal DNA. You know what I'm saying? I ain't got no Cro-Magnon DNA. So you got to be careful how they try to mix these cultures together as if that's what happened. What happened was when these great floods happened and they washed these societies that were on these coastal places, all of a sudden you got these guys in the middle that came from that dinosaur culture.
Okay.
Whatever.
Okay. To check this out, man. So That was a long ass rant. But here's the thing, dude.
That's what you got me here for.
Yeah. But here's the thing. People think just, oh, the water just came and it flooded. Consider this. There was a flood because there were tectonic plates shifting and there was a continent that was sinking under the waters of the ocean. So what's that going to do? That's going to cause water to go everywhere, far and wide. That means the ocean levels are probably going to raise by 200 feet. Okay? So everything that's near a coastline is gone.
They said the coastline was 32 feet above sea level in a matter of minutes. And this the flood he's talking about, my brother's talking about, is the one that took place 14,000 years ago. There was another one 12,000 years ago when some kind of like meteor hit the polar ice cap. So there were two major floods. But when this continent goes down, you're talking about tsunamis everywhere. Everything just changes. So in the blink of an eye, all of a sudden, Egypt was covered with sand. Why do you think the pyramids are covered with sand?
Because the Sphinx was covered with sand. It was only the head was exposed.
No, it was like they find it by mistake. Remember, they find that motherfucker by mistake.
But here's the thing. It was covered like that because it was old. It had been there before the pyramids. And there's water erosion marks that Robert Schoch and John Anthony West often talk about. How there was water erosion marks at the base of the Sphinx when that land was a swamp. It takes a long time to change a swamp into a desert. Thousands and hundreds, tens of thousands of years.
Look, they say at least the Sphinx is 12,000 years old. At least. Now, here, I got one for you.
Göbekli Tepe?
No. I'm deeper than that. But now, first things first, Göbekli Tepe is in Turkey. They find these stone pillars that have animals on it that aren't native to that area, and they're like, this must be from the Ark. Well, check this out. There are several books about the Ark, but they find one book about the Ark where the Ark is not a boat. Guess what the Ark is? The Ark is a pyramid. And this pyramid was built to save these people as the water goes away. There are several stories where of Noah's Ark, where the Ark is not a boat, it's an actual pyramid. So some people believe the pyramids were the Ark. They were designed for people to go in there and hide when this great flood came. When the flood left, they came out. That's some crazy shit, but that tells you how old the story is. The story is at least 12 to 14,000 years old. We know the Sphinx is at least 12,000 years old. The other thing they keep saying about South America and Africa, the two continents, that they believe that if we ever just excavating there's so many cultures that are there, we don't realize they're there. So if we just excavate any part of Africa, we should probably find a civilization we didn't know about. If you excavate any part of South America, you're going to find a civilization we did not know about. They're scared to do it because if they start finding out stuff, look, the farther back they dig, the blacker the people get. That's all I'm trying to tell you.
Let me stop.
So just watch that.
Stop right there. The reason why everything we're talking about ties into the theme of this episode, which is Negro esoterica, is because all of these ancient religions all come from and study a prior civilization. And so what we're doing is we're going into each of these ancient civilizations so you can see that where these religions came from. Because you have to just put your mind into these viewpoints of these people who lived 100,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, 8,000 years ago. They're not thinking the way you and I do. So the concept of using sound tools to cut stone, that's pretty esoteric. All right.
That's some deep shit.
These were dark-skinned people that were doing these things, using sound to cut stone to build the Sphinx, to build pyramids, to build up the civilization of Atlantis, which is where we're going back to now. And I'm about to bust your head open with this one because the ruling class, the rulers of Atlantis, when it fell, were the Toltecs. The people that built Machu Picchu were from Atlantis. They left Atlantis after the Golden Age began to descend, to fall down, to go down, to fall apart. And so you have to understand that these people who existed in these times, that built these things from stone, these monoliths, these great palaces, these great things that are worshipped and just, fawned over to this day, They were creating things through levitating stone and cutting stone with sound and using
They, they,
light
they,
as a tool to shape things.
they were using the Earth's own aura, the own power field around the Earth to power
Okay,
their things.
power up, motherfucker, because now I need you to think like this. If you are thinking in these ways, if you are using these types of things, today will call that magic. That's a higher form of magic. When you use low, dark magic, sexual energy, and blood, and these types of things to cast spells, that's lower magic. These people who are on a higher vibration were using white, powerful magic, knowledge, and wisdom. You dig? So it is mad esoteric, is what we're talking about. So the
And whenever you read about Solomon and his powers, like they call Solomon the smartest man to ever live. He was into some crazy shit. That's what. Why do you think these Masons, all these guys, worship the Temple of Solomon, and we're looking for it? Is because dude built the shit probably by himself. We just don't know what all he was capable of doing. And so when they find these books in Ethiopia, that the Temptation of Solomon, there's some crazy stuff. Or the Book of Enoch. That's another book from the Bible that they don't like to talk about. That Book of Enoch will blow your fucking mind. That's all I'm trying to tell y'all. So, look, we're getting deep. I know we sound crazy.
No, keep going. Keep looking crazy. Keep sounding crazy. That's what this is for.
Look this shit up for yourself is all we're saying. You know, nobody's making shit up. We ain't got to do this to entertain nobody. But when you start reading, you're like, wow, this is crazy. They ain't tell me about this. Or they did tell you about it, but they told you as like a kid story. They told you like, hey, like as a bedtime story. But the thing is, I'm telling you, they've been healing us people for years. Remember how they sit there and said they found those skulls in Egypt, in Kemet, that where they had performed brain surgery on these people, and they kept saying they performed brain surgery, but they never used any anesthesia. Them lying motherfuckers. They use anesthesia. What do you think they use for anesthesia, Mr. Roscoe? Cocaine. They were using cocaine 2,000 and 3,000 years ago to perform brain surgery on people. So that tells you right there that Africa had a connection with South America, because cocaine don't grow in Africa. It grows in South America. We know that to this day. So they were trading gold for cocaine, and they would use the cocaine to perform surgery. So they were doing brain surgery. And remember, they see that the hole had healed. It had began to heal. So that means that person survived the brain surgery. They survived it. So this person didn't die from the brain surgery. Whatever they removed, whatever kind of thing they did, that person didn't die. He or she had a full life. So that tells you that they were performing brain surgery while these people were still in caves. Don't ever forget your greatness. Proceed, my brother.
Okay, so we had parked it in Atlantis. We talked about the Toltecs and how they were the ruling class in the Golden Age until the end of Atlantis when it sank. And they left Atlantis and they went to South America, to the mountains of the Andes, and they built Machu Picchu. Now, the fifth root race is the Aryan. The Aryan, all living humans are connected to the Aryans in some way. All living humans have one common ancestor that goes back 18 million years ago. And when the people of Atlantis left, some of them went to South America, some of them went back into Africa, and then some of them went into the Himalayas. And so many episodes ago, in episode number 23, we talked about Agents of Darkness. And we talked about how the Nazis believed that they were descendants of the Aryans, which is true, but all of us are in some way. These are the people that left Atlantis and they went to the Himalayas. And from the Himalayas, they branched out and they went into, different parts of the world. They started the Shinto religion, the Hindu religion, and all these different religions. But bear in mind, while the Aryans were doing their things, the Africans were been there in Africa. They'd come from Atlantis, and they had been in Africa for a long time already doing their thing when the Aryans had branched off and did their own thing. But the Asian people came to be when the Atlantean people left. They were the seventh and last race of the people of Lemuria. And they eventually left Africa and moved and spread all over Asia. But they were what will be called the Mongoloid race or the Mongolian race. And I think it's pretty funny how just about 1 in 3 men in Eastern Europe and 3/4 of Asia is a descendant of Genghis Khan. But that's a little interesting genetic marker to show how one man can spread his seed all over the world. Therefore, it's not a huge mental leap to consider that many of those humans are descended from an ancient empire that once existed. So, what you have to understand is that the history that you have been taught is a warped and closed-minded, narrow-minded view, a narrative that has been taught to you, a narrative that preaches that modern people, come from monkeys, and they come from Cro-Magnons, and there was a flood, and here we are. The first city to be built after the flood was ruled by a king named Etana. But we find out about this when these clay tablets from the Ashurbanipal library, the library of Ashurbanipal was named after the king Ashurbanipal. And in that library existed clay tablets that told about the times before the flood and the kings that existed before the flood. And also in that library were the epics of Gilgamesh. This library existed around 7th century BC. So in the epics of Gilgamesh, it talks about the time before the flood. So here is concrete proof that civilizations existed before the Great Flood. So it isn't just, like I said before, some guy in West Africa going on about this, Edgar Casey and his the sleeping psychic, sleeping prophet telling about the city of Atlantis, or it's not Helena Blavatsky talking about it in The Secret Doctrine. It's all of those people. It's everything that we've been talking about. But you have to go outside of your normal Greco-Roman educational system to get this information.
You got to understand, you were miseducated on purpose. And until people come to the conclusion that this was not by accident, they don't want you asking questions. If you believe anything that's not Christian, then all of a sudden you're a pagan. If you do here's a crazy question. If the Native Americans of this country had contact with the Egyptians or the Kemits, that means they had paper. So whatever happened to all the Native American books? There's only four surviving Native American books. There are 3 different codexes which explain the different levels of the priests, but they were actually Native American books. They were burned by some bishop because they said they were evil. Trust me, there were cultures that existed long, long before these other cultures took them over. The other thing is that I'm just telling you, look it up. They found these 2 campsites, one in Arizona and one in New Mexico, that were 50,000 years old.
Yeah. Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah. So when they find these campsites, the poor woman, the female archaeologist that finds them, you hear us talk about this more than one. They run her out the whole. She's selling flowers on the road. We talk about it, but then you find this other campsite 50 miles away. What does that mean? They're telling us there are people. They keep finding artifacts that are like how many feet down beneath the dirt? Like 50 feet down beneath the dirt. That's 50,000 years old. So how are you finding these artifacts over like 50, 60 feet down that shouldn't be covered by much stuff, but they're like intricate artifacts? That means there were technologies and cultures that existed that flourished. And then this great flood comes and erases all of them. And then all of a sudden you got dumb motherfuckers in charge. It's just that simple.
So okay, but park it right there for a second. So after the flood happened, the Sumerian civilization was a bunch of warring states. And King Etana was the ruler of a city named Kish, and he was the one to unite all of Sumeria. And so he united Sumeria, and from there on, they developed a king list. Now, when you look at this Sumerian king list, it's pretty damn crazy. The Sumerian king list is basically a list that shows in succession all the kings that existed after the flood. So this king list talks about the lives of these kings and how long they live. And it's quite surprising, like when you see like how long they live for like thousands and thousands of years, and like, wait a minute, how is this possible? How is this humanly possible for people to live that long? That is some strange esoteric stuff. But if you go and you look up the Sumerian king list, you will see exactly what I'm talking about. So then a person will say, oh, well, they're using a different measurement of time.
No, that's just the easy way out.
Yep.
So they find this, it's like a bell, and it has all the names of these Sumerian kings and all these different kings. And remember, people, for a long time, people kept saying, well, where's Nimrod? Because Nimrod's the one that we know about in the Bible. Where's Nimrod? Where's Nimrod? All of a sudden, they start exploring this, and they find this name. And you got to remember that back then, that the Hebrews didn't write down the vowels. So they find this name that matches up exactly. They realize the Hebrews, when they talked about Nimrod, they didn't put the vowels. This is the same guy, and you find out where he fell in it. So these histories, this is world history. It's not just regional history. It intermingles, and they found Nimrod on that king list. Okay. And they realized that, okay.
Check this out. So the king list, it says these kings are descended from heaven, and so they descend from heaven and they come down to earth and they rule men. So okay, descended from heaven. Okay, if I'm going to be a nuts and bolts kind of guy, that sounds like a flying saucer. Whatever. Extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, call it what you want. But these kings lived these strange, long lives. The first one lived 28,800 years. The next one lived 36,000 years. The next one was 43,200 years. The next one was 28,800 years. The guy that followed him was 36,000 years. Then after him, 28,000 years. The next one was 21,000 years. After him, another one for 18,600 years. And this goes on and on and on. You're like, well, how is this possible? How are these guys living for this long? This is crazy. So, okay, these guys that I just read, they existed before the flood. So that was before the flood. And that would make sense if you consider the timeline we've been talking about in regards to Lemuria, Atlantis, and these ancient empires and Mu. So then when you look at the king list, then you have guys from the dynasty of Kish. For the first one was 1,200 years. Then after him, 960 years. Then after him, 670, 420, 300, 840, 960, 840, 900, 600. It seems like it's going down when you look at it.
Now, hold on. If you have a problem believing this, check out Kemetic history. Check out Egyptian history, where Egyptian history swear it down. They have 37 dynasties or like 52, some crazy number of dynasties, and we're only aware of what's like 17. Mm-hmm. So where are these other dynasties? Because the culture is much older than you realize. They haven't found the ruins yet. Same thing in Australia. They find Egyptian writings in Australia. They find some Egyptian statues. They find some writings on these caves in Australia.
Okay.
Now everybody said it was.
But you know what that is?
You know where I'm going.
Yes. Go ahead.
Where I'm going with it.
Go for it.
Basically, so nobody can decipher it. They said it's not real. It's fake. Somebody's just playing a game. Then some old guy wakes up. He's like, "What the hell are you talking about? This is from the third dynasty of Egypt. That's why y'all don't know this. This is an ancient form of writing." So that tells you that the form of writing they were using predates the form of writing that these other people were familiar with. The world was connected a long time ago. This whole idea that we just now found out transatlantic transportation, that's bullshit. So the form of writing they were using in that Australian cave was an ancient form of Egyptology that they didn't recognize. Go ahead, my brother. I'm sorry. Proceed.
So when you consider the Olmecs, and these huge African heads that you find in Mexico, and you wonder, how did they get there? How were they carved? Who did this? These are ancient Africans that were there a long time ago. And stone keeps the memory of land. Stone keeps time better than anything. The people want to say, oh, maybe the Olmecs had these stone heads in 1,200 years ago, 2,000 years ago. Try longer than that. because we're talking about civilizations that rose and fell 10 times, 100 times longer than modern civilizations, 10 times longer than the Egyptian civilizations. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about ancient, dusty inhabitants of the earth.
The issue is that they do this carbon dating, but carbon dating don't work on stone. They have to do it on whatever wood they find in the area. Oh, the head was on a wooden platform and they dated it. You don't fucking know with stone. And we don't know how old Egypt is. We just assume it's this old. But we're saying the reason they say 6,000 years old is because what my brother told you 30 minutes ago, that Roman Catholic Church is based on Egyptology. But if Roman Catholic Church knows that Egypt is over 6,000 years, then all of a sudden it kills their validity.
There you go.
You got to understand
there it is.
That this culture predates that by so much. And you know, like the archives in the Vatican go on forever. We'll never get those. The library at Alexandria that was destroyed, we'll never get that information back. So this information is kept from you on purpose, because that the people who are in power would not be in power if you knew what to do to get rid of them, or if you knew what to do for you to ascend. How many of these religions have these amazing stories about somebody ascending? They become a star. These people ascend. This is not figurative. My brother just told you that some of us are descended from from people who are energy. So if you're descended from a person who's energy and you have the right mind state, you mean to tell me that you could not ascend? I get it. I know this is some crazy shit for y'all, especially with black folks talking crazy shit. Y'all are like, whatever. Stop. Don't dismiss me because I'm black. Believe me because I'm black. I'm not making this shit up. Like we've talked about Immaculate Conception. We know stories of women having kids and men ain't nowhere around. Trust me, the Bible was designed to keep the woman down. We look at the Bible from this modern day standard where, okay, ain't no black folks in the Bible. Look how it treated women. It was designed to keep women in check. That's what it was for. Because if we came from a woman and you found out the first person was a woman, it wasn't a man, wouldn't that change your whole view of women? Wouldn't women probably rise up, get rid of some of us men? So a lot of these things you learn in sociology class. Remember what they tell you is that religion is a tool for the bourgeoisie to control the proletariat, the working class. And a lot of these countries, the women are the working class, and they're controlled on purpose, because if they knew their greatness, we'd be in trouble. So yes, these ain't stories. This is actual history. And when you realize what's real, and you realize, that's why that show American Gods is so great, because it talks about some dope shit on there. It talks about some crazy shit. But it's like, okay, well, damn, I recognize where they're going with this. So when you talk about these ancient civilizations, now the dates my brother's giving you, that's some crazy shit. But read it. There's books out there that talk about this stuff. There's stuff that these discoveries found years ago that, like, wow, this is legitimate shit. So
bringing it back full circle to what we were talking about earlier. When I read this document that was written by Dr. King in 1949 going into 1950 about the influence of ancient mystery religions on Christianity, I was more surprised that he started with the Greco-Roman influence and perspective, and he did not go any further back. When you consider such a strong backstory for the influence of spirituality and religions goes back even further, when you also consider that this is a country that borrows so much from Egypt, yet he was only willing to view things from a Greco-Roman point of view. I found that very strange indeed. He said nothing about the Kemetic mystery schools and what was taken from there and used by the Greeks. Or he never even talked about Horus and Isis. If he did, it was only briefly, but it wasn't really from an Egyptian perspective. So bringing it back to Negro esoterica.
He brought up Osiris like in passing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that was really frustrating. But again, excellent read. His dissertations were amazing. They're very good. Please don't think we're downing him. I'm just disappointed because when you hear from one of our black idols, one of our black icons, you want to hear something black. But all the stuff he talked about were Asian and Arab, basically. And it was desert people, but it wasn't from the black desert. So
right. And so that goes back to the point I was making earlier in the show where I talked about how this white man, the British white guy, Oraj, came to Harlem and he influenced the Harlem Renaissance writers with esoterica that was all Eastern religions. I'm like, that's cool, but what about the African ones? Talk about that. But see, that leads me to believe that these Negroes that were writing from this perspective out of ignorance did not dig deeper into the African origins of religion or esotericism. And they just...
See, I disagree.
Wait. Like Dr. King, they also parked it from a Greco-Roman point of view and allowed that to influence what they were doing. Now, don't get me wrong. There were black writers that spoke about, things. I mean, there's George Massey and these people who talked about Egypt as the light of the world. Yes. But there was a huge Eastern influence on these black writers.
Look, my whole issue is that whenever you read about the Boule, I miss Steve Copley, rest in peace, he would talk about these Boule ass niggas, and you would think like, oh man, that person can't be that. But if he's Boule, then he wouldn't want to talk from a black perspective. He wants to talk from a House Negro perspective and give all the credit to white people or light-skinned brown people.
All right, so bringing it back to Black Negro Esoterica. There's going to be more episodes about this. All right, this is the first part of many shows on the Negro and Esoterica. But we want to introduce you from a historical perspective that shows how far back the lineage goes into time using high technology in a way that would be construed as occult or magic. So I want to draw the line and show that there is low magic and there's the high magic of the priest magicians of long ago. And in the next episode, we're going to get further and deeper into that when we talk about the shamans of the Zulus or the Dogon even further. And there's more where that came from. So we're going to get deep on the next episode, even further deeper than we are now on the Negro and Esoterica. You got anything else you want to say, bro?
Nah, be safe, y'all. Holla back.
Peace.